Alhamdulillah. solved wa control pure
কথা কেন না পিএসও বা পিআরও হইলো ঠিক হই তো দেশাই
Hello, Namrata. Is Dr. Namrata here?
हेलो जी मैम है वो
Javed, everyone has joined in, I think.
ऑलमोस्ट कुछ लोग अभी some participants are joining one by one.
Okay.
Guest
The guest is there.
नहीं गेस्ट अभी नहीं आया मैंने उनको बोला she will join in a couple of minutes.
Please, keep up the participants' responses or whatever. There's chats coming in, so I hope someone is responding to that. Namrata, or you can
नहीं
respond.
मैं कर रहा हूँ मैं रिस्पॉन्ड कर रहा हूँ मैम सबको. जी मैम ज्वाइन कर लीजिए प्लीज।
हेलो,
जी सर।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
और सलाम। जी 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 सर। I think we should start the second session.
नहीं भाई आगे सुन। कैसे ठंडा पड़ता हूँ यार।
अस्सलाम वालेकुम मैडम।
वालेकुम सलाम।
खैरियत से मैडम?
जी। What happened, Javed?
Yes ma'am, our guest is joining. I'm just waiting for the final word from the panelist. Hello ma'am, Zeba ma'am, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Am I audible?
Yes, yes ma'am. Okay, a very good afternoon participants. So this is our second session, and this will be taken over by Ms. Zeba Warsi, principal correspondent from CNN News 18. But before that, I would like to invite our Dean, Dr. Nishat Arif Hussaini, who is a Dean in Faculty of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, for the word of welcome. Ma'am, please.
We are not able to visualize Ms. Zeba Warsi. Can we see her, please?
Ma'am, pardon ma'am.
Am I?
Ma'am, the guest is not visible.
Yes, it's visible, ma'am.
Yes. Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Zeba Warsi. Yeah, I'm Dr. Nishat. And good afternoon and welcome to all the participants, all whom I can see on the screen and all those who are also there. I'm very happy to have you here on this second session of the web seminar, which has been organized by the Department of Mass Communication and Journalism, PG, from the Khaja Bandanawaz University in Kalaburgi, also known as Gulbarga, in Karnataka, North Karnataka. And welcome to you all, and welcome to our special guest and expert on the occasion of this, that the role of alternative media in the COVID pandemic. We are a very actually a 58 to 60-year-old society which has been established in Gulbarga when none existed before, and this was actually the whole USP of the society, Khaja Education Society, is service to humanity through education. And the founder of the society was Janab Sayyid Shah Muhammad Al Hussaini. And his vision was just to educate, his first vision, of course, was to educate the girls. So the first institution was a girls' school. Then soon after that, a boys' school followed. And last year, it is in 2008, work was consolidated and we have become a university, which has been recognized as a private university by the government of Karnataka, a state university. And this has been via a legislative act of the Legislative Assembly of the Karnataka government in August 2018. Since then, we've been working as before, but we've added on many, many departments. The Department of Mass Communication, which comes under the Faculty of Arts, Sciences and Humanities, and the Department of English, the faculty under the Faculty of Languages and Urdu. And we have the science departments under the Faculty of Sciences, apart from the undergraduate, and we also have a medical college and a engineering college. So with this established society, we're looking forward to introduce ourselves and this department to the rest of the country. And as you know, that the Dargah of the Sufi saint Hazrat Khaja Bandanawaz is quite well known, very well known in fact. And that is why we have access, we are actually connected to a very large number of people all through India. So with this brief I'd like to hand over things to Dr. Namrata Raut is also there, who's also from the, over to ma'am, Ms. Zeba, because we'd like to listen to her views and of course an interactive session with all the other participants. Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks a lot for that very much needed introduction. I'm very pleased and delighted to be invited by your prestigious university, and I also appreciate the effort that has gone into putting together this webinar, because it is a very crucial topic. And if we have journalism enthusiasts, journalists, aspiring journalists who'd like to know more about this entire situation that the country and the world is going through and how they are supposed to really look at it and cover it from the media lens, I think this is a very topical issue that the university thought of discussing with experts, with various experts. I am rather not as senior as some of your other panelists. We've had a session with Mr. Umar Shankar. He's a colleague of mine. I have worked with him on the field here in the National Capital in Delhi, and I hope you had a nice session with him as well. He has worked extensively in NDTV India. I have recently started. I would consider myself far more junior to him. But that's the thing about journalism.
Ma'am, excuse me. Excuse me, Ms. Zeba Warsi. Actually, I want to introduce you formally to the participants. So it's parts already. Sure. It's remaining. Okay. So thank you so much. Without delaying any much, I would like to introduce Ms. Zeba Warsi. She has been associated with CNN News 18 for a very long time, and who covers politics, special reports, investigative journalism, and long format stories also. I think Zeba Warsi is the recipient of 2019 Red Ink Award with special mention in the human rights category for her expose on child sex trade in Madhya Pradesh. Apart from a special investigation, she tracks Congress Party, aviation, women, and child development minister as beat. She has worked extensively on a special series called Reporters Project, a weekend show that involves in-depth ground reporting on a given political news event. She also anchors an election special weekend show called Yangistan, a youth-based debate show on CNN News 18. So please welcome Zeba Warsi. Thank you for joining with us.
Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Professor Javi. Thanks a lot for that really warm and really long introduction. So yes, like my introduction tells you, I am a reporter at heart, and I have always been very clear. Journalism is about ground reportage. Journalism is about having your feet on the ground to really verify facts firsthand. And through my journalism career so far, I've always focused and excelled in ground reportage. First of all, I'd like to ask, am I audible to each one of you?
Yes.
No,
yes,
I
yes,
think
yes.
the sound, David, Dr.
Yeah.
David, you have to do something with the sound.
I think it's not very much clear, ma'am. Might be there some network problem. Network.
Is it better now?
Now, yes. Now it's okay.
So I'm going to hold it like this. So is it
Okay,
audible?
yeah. Yes, ma'am. Please.
All right. So I'm delighted to address this webinar, as we call it. We are living in day and age where seminars have now been converted into webinars. Social distancing has become the new normal, and meeting you in person is perhaps going to take a long time now. There are going to be a couple of months before we can even think of having our life back to that kind of normalcy. But thanks to technology, we're able to communicate through our smartphones, and that is indeed a new technological breakthrough that the entire world is going through. Our lives are changing, and with the changing life, journalism as we know it is also evolving. The traditional forms of media, which were the print, television, broadcasting, essentially news channels and newspapers, are now being replaced or perhaps supplemented by alternative media. Did someone want to say something?
No, ma'am, please carry on.
All right. So traditional forms of media, like television, like newspapers, have now been replaced, not replaced, but supplemented and sort of complemented as well by alternative forms of media, your digital media, new media as we also call it in journalism schools, social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, different forms of newer websites which are dealing with an entirely different aspect of journalism. We have fact-checking websites now, like Alt News, and these new forms of journalistic tools are what we understand as alternative media, something that is apart from the mainstream media, something that provides a different alternative, something that provides a different aspect to viewers, to audiences. That is, in my understanding, alternative media. Now, today we're living at a time where alternative media has become extremely important. It is something that is perhaps changing the way we read news, changing the way we understand news, changing the way we access news, because it is accessible. It is far more accessible. You don't need a cable TV connection to log on to a website. You don't need a subscription to a newspaper to get access to news articles. That is how accessible media has now become with these alternative media platforms. You can have it at the tip of your finger. You have it at the tip of your. I would request all participants to mute. I would request all participants to mute their screens. That would help better in this particular webinar. Has everyone muted their screens? There's an option if you just click on the screen. Yeah, all right. So, yeah, alternative media is more accessible. Alternative media is providing information in a manner which perhaps mainstream media has not been able to, especially right now when we are going through what people call an unprecedented time. Now, if you've been watching the news, you must have heard this word many, many times being spoken by news anchors, by reporters, by experts, that COVID-19 situation is an unprecedented one, which exactly means that this is something that we've never witnessed before, which means we don't know how to deal with it, we don't know too much about it, and that stands true for the disease. Coronavirus epidemic, the pandemic, is something that globally people are still trying to understand. It's not just India, but developed nations, first world countries, like we call them, the United States of America, the United Kingdom, European countries like Italy, France, they've all dealt with the dark side of COVID-19. They've all gone through the peak of the disease, and they also are learning on the go. They're learning from each day. So it's something that not many people know about, and which is why there is a big information black hole surrounding it as well. And that's why we use the term unprecedented when describing COVID-19. So while the situation is unprecedented, it also demands a steady flow of information to the public. It demands that journalists step up to the job, and perhaps mainstream media is still adapting to the change, because if you go by the past 2 months throughout the lockdown in India, this has been the only story that any news media is covering or focusing on. This has been the only story, the only breaking news that we listen to, that we read about day after day, because currently this is the only thing that's on all of our minds. Until we are done and hopefully we overcome this crisis, it's going to be like that. But the past 2 months have also taught us that there are many stories surrounding the lockdown in India. There are many stories surrounding the COVID-19 crisis in India that have been brought to the fore by alternative media platforms. Many stories that have come to our notice on social media. Not many stories, if I talk about the migrant crisis, the migrant distress that India has witnessed, it is the biggest exodus of migrants that modern world has ever witnessed, and this has happened in our country over the past 2 months. Thousands and thousands of migrants have walked on foot from their city of work to their native villages, thousands of kilometers on foot, and that is no human feat. It is something that is incredible and at the same time very distressing. There are horror stories that have emerged out of this, but the initial part of the migrant crisis came up on alternative media platforms. We read about it in some niche website. We saw some ground reporters publish it on their social media platforms. We, of course, I have to mention the tremendous work done by the senior journalist who has put in the effort to travel in the beginning when the migrant crisis had just erupted. And she used to upload it on her own media venture called Mojo, which essentially is mobile journalism, which is again an alternative media platform. And many of my own reports, when I've covered the migrant crisis, I would always put it out on my Twitter profile, on my Twitter and Facebook platform, because that has, I believe that has a certain reach that mainstream media does not boast of. When things go viral on Twitter, it essentially means that it is reaching those many people and it is creating a conversation. So that is the power that alternative media platforms hold in the current times. Many of my stories, if I talk about the report that I did, the fact that migrant laborers, after much talk on them, finally Shramik trains were announced by the union government. But there were reports that these Shramik trains were being charged to the migrants. So migrant laborers in different parts of the country were essentially paying for the ticket. And that, as we know it, is as shocking as it gets. After all that they've suffered, we were still asking them to pay for their tickets in some of the states. And at the same time, I know, because I also cover the Ministry of Civil Aviation, that the initial evacuation flights that India conducted, flights that went to China, to Wuhan, the epicenter of coronavirus in March, the flights that went to Italy, the flights that went to Iran. There were around 5 evacuation flights that were conducted by India, and we brought back stranded Indians. We brought back Indians who were stuck in these coronavirus epidemic centers. But we brought them back as part of an evacuation process, which is free of cost. So essentially, while Indians who were stranded in Italy, in China, in Iran, were brought back by the government of India, and they were brought back free of cost, and that is very admirable. That is good. These were Indians who were stuck in a very problematic situation. There was coronavirus outbreak all around them. They wanted to return home. So that's great that our government stepped up to the challenge, and India was one of the first countries to evacuate its citizens from these coronavirus hotspots. So we brought back our citizens, and we did not charge them for it. That is admirable. But at the same time, the contrast is that we were charging our poorer Indians who wanted to get back to their native villages through these Shramik special trains. And that was the irony that journalism needed to highlight. So I did write on, before I could talk about it on CNN News 18, that is a national news channel, a mainstream media, I wrote about it for news18.com, and I also wrote about it extensively on Twitter and on Facebook. And believe me, before we could even take it up on mainstream media, the news value of that article was such that it caught on, it created a conversation on social media, it created a conversation, at web platforms, other websites followed it up, other news organizations, many alternative media platforms followed it up. Politicians started talking about it, and then eventually we heard a clarification coming in from the railways that railways is incurring 85% of the cost, which essentially means it's subsidizing the ticket. So state governments are supposed to pay for it, but at least they came forward and they said that migrant laborers are not supposed to pay for the ticket. So that sort of is an impact that was created because of my report and reports of other journalists who followed up on the story. So that is the power of alternative media. That is the power that these newer platforms hold because they have a certain kind of reach. Another aspect that we witnessed in the COVID-19 distress with regards to alternative media is help. We see the way India is dealing with the crisis is very different from other countries. We have a massive population. We have a major chunk of our population which is economically distressed, which is economically weak. So for us, lockdown also meant that some people don't have access to food. Some people don't have access to basic healthcare. And food was, of course, the center of all of this. Our Prime Minister also suggested that we should help Feed India. The hashtag Feed India was trending on Twitter in the initial phase of the lockdown. Many good Samaritans, politicians, government as well, has been providing free ration and free food to people, cooked food as well as dry ration to people who need them, the needy in different parts of the country. Now, alternative media platforms were helping people to get access to these dry rations. I know of many, many incidents. If we only look at Twitter, if there was a story that a certain group of people in a certain place are not getting dry ration, it would just be tweeted out, and then the authorities would take note of it, or a good Samaritan or an NGO would take note of it, and food would reach these people. This is the power of alternative media. This is the instant reach, the instant accessibility that alternative media platforms have vis-a-vis mainstream media platforms. This is something that we've learned in COVID-19 while covering the COVID-19 distress. So that is indeed a very, very powerful tool, and if used in the right manner, we've learned that it can definitely help us attain our goals in terms of the kind of help that we can drive, the kind of change that we can drive. Because at the end of the day, what is journalism all about? It is speaking truth to power and driving a positive change. So if it is about driving a positive change and creating an impact through your story, it is something that is being done through alternative media platforms. It is something that we can achieve through social media, through new media tools. So that is a great, great plus point. And that is a plus point that we've learned about while covering the COVID-19 crisis using alternative media platforms. And that is something that I'd like to highlight. But like all things, there is a flip to it. While we have learned that yes, it is a powerful tool, social media platforms are a powerful tool, digital platforms are a powerful tool, and if used in the right manner, it can lead to positive impact. But at the same time, there is a great deal of responsibility on veracity of news, on verifying the news that is propagated on these platforms. Because one wrong, fake article can be circulated thousands and thousands of times, misinforming thousands of people. And we've seen that well in India. Through the COVID-19 distress, we've seen what happened in the Tablighi Jamaat COVID-19 outbreak. While yes, what they did was wrong, and it ended up creating a cluster of coronavirus in the initial phase. But the kind of news articles that were being shared on social media were mostly fake, and then termed fake as well eventually by the authorities. Many articles about Tablighi Jamaat members spitting on people, that turned out to be fake. The video that went viral showing them misbehaving and spitting in the quarantine center, that turned out to be fake. So a lot of these fake videos were circulating. So that is the flip side of alternative media not used in the right manner. And not just the Tablighi Jamaat incident, but also throughout the entire coronavirus outbreak and the coverage, we know for a fact that one fake video, one unverified article, one unverified piece of news can create a lot of trouble. It can lead to many repercussions, negative repercussions of life. That was one thing that we've learned in the crisis. We all know that the news has to be 100% verified. It has to be completely fact-checked and only then put out after taking all aspects into consideration. But during the virus crisis, even more important, because the way news is being consumed is a lot more usual times. Now, Thompson found said that globally, the number of people who are reading news on different media platforms, whether it's mainstream media or alternative media, is at least 3 more than usual. That means if 2 people used to watch a certain thing, now 6 people are watching it. So that is another aspect of our media consumption globally has increased during the coronavirus crisis, which means that
is there an issue? Am I audible? Am I audible? Should I continue?
Yes, you're audible, ma'am. Hello. Yes, you're audible for some time. The voice had gone. Yeah, you're audible.
Am I audible now? Should I continue?
Is it better?
All right. So I'm going ahead. I'd request the rest of the participants to mute their screens. It becomes easier in understanding what the person is speaking. Okay. So I'd just like to conclude saying that alternative media platforms have a great reach. They have the power to tell a story in a manner that mainstream media cannot. They pick up stories that mainstream media often ignores, which means that a lot of things that go uncovered with regards to human rights, gender rights, with respect to minority rights. These aspects will get covered on alternative media platforms because mainstream media has its limitations. But alternative media is vast, it's infinite. There is no cap on the number of stories that you can do. There is no cap on the duration of videos you can upload. So that is a major plus point. It is more accessible to people. It has a wider reach, as we know. It is creating impact. It happened in distress. It was connecting people to those who needed help. So those are the plus points. But the flip side of it is that it needs to be verified. I cannot emphasize this enough that alternative media platforms, social media platforms, people who put out news on forums, on Facebook, on Instagram, YouTube, they have added responsibility to double check what they're putting out. They have an added responsibility to verify their news. So news verification fact becomes, if not more important, on alternative media platforms because they have that tendency to go viral. And if a wrong news or a fake news ends up going viral, then it leads to a lot of damage. So that needs to be checked. But all in all, through the coronavirus crisis, we've learned that alternative media has a great deal of role that it is playing in covering news from all aspects and giving out information. Yes, there are shortcomings. There are some news articles, some videos which are unverified, which are fake, are also being circulated, and that needs to be checked. That needs to be monitored. But I still believe that it has a great deal of reach, and it is something that we should be happy about. We should be using as well with checks and balances. That is how I'd like to conclude. Now, I'd like to take some questions if we can from participants. If you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer it. Professor Javed, if you'd
Yes.
like to moderate
Yes.
the questions here.
Yes, I think there is one question. Somebody says that, do you think that alternative media has become more powerful than the mainstream media, and they are playing good role when we compare to the mainstream media? So what do you think?
Well, media deal of power
Hello,
has
ma'am.
reach, and in many cases has greater power.
Hello, ma'am. There is audio problem from your side.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear
Is
me?
it better now?
Yes, please, ma'am. Please.
I can hear you.
Yes, please.
I'm
carry on.
continuing.
Yeah.
So like I said earlier, alternative media has a great deal of power. It has a greater reach and a faster reach than mainstream media. See, when I do a story for the news channel, for my news channel that I work with, I will be shooting it. I'll come back to my station, to my newsroom. I'll script it together. I'll edit it out, and eventually we will decide to play out for it, whether it is 6 p.m., 7 p.m., 8 p.m., 9 p.m. bulletin. And only then it reaches a greater audience, of course, and then it leads to a conversation, and then we see an impact. With alternative media platforms, everything is faster. The moment a video is recorded, it is put out on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook. And then if it has news value, if it has any form of information value, informative value, it has a tendency to go viral. So it has a faster reach. In today's times, I would say responsible alternative media do hold a lot of power. Perhaps in some cases even more than mainstream media because of their reach, because of the manner in which they circulate. But like I said earlier, it is very important because on mainstream news channels, but I am very well aware that there are many mainstream news channels who do not fact check. There are some mainstream news channels who drive a certain agenda. So I'm not going to count them in when I say this. But responsible mainstream news channels will always verify news before putting it out. So verified news, if you only look at verified news, and there are more verified news on mainstream news channels, responsible mainstream news channels, as opposed to alternative media platforms. But if we specifically talk about the power of journalism, the current witness in COVID-19 stress, alternative media has definitely shown us that if the right people are using the right tools, then information and journalism can really propagate, and journalism can fulfill its duty, which is informing the correct information to the public. We've seen that happen in the COVID-19. They have a great deal of power as well as a great deal of responsibility.
Okay, ma'am.
The voice is still breaking.
Actually, it breaks sometime. Now it's clear.
Okay.
During the time if your speech it sometimes breaks.
Any further questions, anything that you'd like me to clarify, whether the audio
Yes,
was
yeah.
not, was not
One
up to
question.
the mark,
One
then
question
I
is
wouldn't mind repeating.
yes. There is one question that was asking that is there any mechanism to make your coverage more objective, or so that you should stick to the credibility of your stories?
See, the job of any journalist is to be objective. We are not supposed to criticize, and those who take are not journalists. Every news story that you do, you have to look at it from all perspectives. You have to gather information from all perspectives as a third party who has no interest in the story. So that goes without saying that journalism has to be objective. As far as the mechanism is concerned, I think it's more of how you inculcate it. Your editors will have to be objective as well. When a reporter does a story and puts forth on the edit table, the editor needs to look at it from an objective manner rather than giving it a spin, rather than giving it a certain angle which will favor one side over the other. When you're, if any of our aspiring journalists are planning to start a blog, for instance, so that is something that comes under alternative media. They will start writing about what they see, or they will perhaps start reporting on issues around them. So when they're starting their blog, the first golden rule of journalism is to ensure that you are not thinking about a story from a different lens. Don't presume facts. Even if it's about something that you've witnessed firsthand, you would still want to ask about it to a number of people. So the mechanisms of objectification, mechanisms of fact while you are while you're working on a story, it is about asking all credible sources. Get your facts through credible sources. People who do not have any stakes in it, people who don't have any vested interest, they should be the ones you're asking information from. Secondly, when you're piecing it together, you get versions from different perspectives. So if it is about person A and person B, you will ask the reaction from person A and person B. So you will get a reaction from both sides. That way, your story will be as objective as it gets, because it was sourced from credible sources of information. It was sourced from credible voices, credible people who don't have vested interest. And secondly, you, while reporting the entire story, you were taking all sides into consideration. It's not like you only talked about, say, a BJP reaction was in your story, but a Congress reaction wasn't. Something as simple as that. So if you want to be objective, you have to take all sides into consideration. You have to keep a clear mind. You yourself should not assume facts, and you should ensure that your sources are credible and have no vested interest.
There is,
I hope that answers.
yes, thank you, ma'am. There is one more question. That do you think that alternative media can set an agenda for the mainstream media as far as the coverage of main issues are concerned?
Well, certainly, we've seen at least that happen in the coronavirus crisis. Alternative media has been able to set the agenda, set the discourse. See, in India and globally as well, media often reflects what's happening in the society. The political discourse, the socio-political discourse in the country often sets the agenda for what the media will cover. If there is a protest that is taking place, and the protest goes on and it starts becoming the talk of town, then inevitably the media will cover the protest, because that is what is the conversation, that is what people want to know about. Because the media, mainstream media, will always give the people, the audience, what they're interested in. There are different tools for it. There are target audiences, and each target audience wants a specific thing. And many mainstream medias function as to what their target audience wants. So certainly that is one aspect. That conversations drive the agenda of news as to what is newsy and what is not newsy. Alternative media platforms have the power to create that conversation. So when we're talking about the migrant labor crisis, we do know that it became something that was being talked about on digital platforms, on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. on WhatsApp. Now, WhatsApp, of course, I don't really count as alternative media in its entirety because there's a great deal of fake news which also propagates on WhatsApp. So that doesn't get checked. There's no way to monitor it, and nobody really is monitoring it. So that's the reason WhatsApp is not entirely a responsible alternative media, because it just gets shared, and many times unverified news gets shared. But in the migrant crisis, we saw that the alternative media platforms, social media platforms, and the videos that were put up by eyewitnesses, by bystanders, by regional reporters, by ground reporters who were traveling and covering the migrant distress. These videos went viral, and they sort of highlighted the plight of the migrants. They created a conversation. They, in a way, forced mainstream media to sit up and take note and understand that, listen, throughout this lockdown, if there's one thing that is definitely newsy, it is the migrant crisis. So with all its limitations, mainstream media also started covering the migrant crisis then. So that is a clear example of how alternative media ended up driving mainstream media to cover the story.
Okay, there is one more interesting question. Can you tell me how citizen journalism can be fruitful during time of a pandemic?
Citizen journalism is very, very important, and it is something that we are witnessing firsthand. I'd like to talk about, I'm not sure if you were aware, but there were many videos of police brutality that we've seen circulate on digital platforms that were picked up by mainstream media as well, from Uttar Pradesh, from different parts of the country for that matter, of police excesses on people violating lockdown norms. Now, these videos were shot by citizen journalists. They were not shot by journalists. They were not shot by journalists. Traditionally, people who are trained in journalism. They were perhaps, everyone has a mobile phone now. So everyone is a journalist in their own right, because they have access to record something. Because journalism is about recording things. Journalism is about putting things on record and reporting it to the public. So now everyone with a mobile phone and who uses it responsibly becomes a citizen journalist, and we've seen that happen. So citizen journalism is certainly a very, very important aspect, and people with the right conscience and people with no agenda do end up benefiting the country as a whole by recording stories which would otherwise go unrecorded, recording incidents of injustice which would otherwise not be out in the public domain. So those videos that went viral of police excesses do out of citizen journalism, and I would implore all this way to certainly start recording everything around you. We're living in a different time for digital boom, where we have access to smartphones, where we have access to the internet, where we have the opportunity to tell a story. You don't have to be employed by a news organization to tell a story. To use this opportunity, use it responsibly, and certainly, at least in your college year, your student year, you should be involved in a lot of citizen journalism initiatives.
There is one more question, ma'am. Do you think that alternative media serves more personal agenda than the social or national agenda?
Well, this is very subjective. Like I said, like I've been emphasizing, and that holds true not just for alternative media, but also for mainstream media. If a reporter or an editor or a journalist who's putting out information has in his mind, has assumption, or has an agenda, then his story will inevitably be written from a certain perspective. So there are some mainstream channels who also work on an agenda, and similarly, there are alternative media platforms who also have an agenda. We do know there are several websites which are outrightly very, very right-wing in their discourse, in their coverage of information. There are websites which are perhaps very left-wing in their coverage of information. So alternative media platforms like mainstream media does have that drawback, that if someone wants to propagate their own personal agenda, then they can. But then that is where verification and fact-checking comes into play. And I feel we're living in an age of information boom, and even viewers and readers need to be informed enough to understand what is to really filter out objective news from slanted coverage, from national news, national agenda versus personal agenda.
Okay, there is one more question.
I request you, Professor Javed, if you can also name the person who's asking the question.
Yes, actually, I just get it down and note it down on my paper from the chat box, and then okay, it is. There is one more question that it says, what actually that makes news channels to run fake or morphed contents? You know, sometimes we see fake content on TV news channels. So do you think there is any motivation from the channel side, and why they run this kind of stories with regard to some channels only?
Well, there are two aspects to it. One is that it could genuinely be a human oversight. It could genuinely be the rush to put out news first. One of the biggest drawbacks of journalism, as we know it currently, is that is the obsession with being first to report something. And living in the competitive media environment that we are, it becomes very, very important for some news channels to just be the first ones to put out a video as soon as they get it. So that essentially compromises the verification process, that compromises fact checking, that compromises the crucial time that is needed to call up your reporter on the ground in that region and ask him, did this incident take place? Is this how it was? Is this video correct? These are important mechanisms and tools of journalism that should be in place before you put out any information, any video on you broadcast it to the general public. So first aspect is that some mainstream channels perhaps ignore that very, very step and very important journalist check to verify to ensure that whatever they've got is absolutely correct before putting it out. So they in the race to be first, they end up putting out information without verifying it. That is one aspect. The other aspect is, like I said earlier, there are some mainstream organizations who do cover stories from a lens, who cover stories through an agenda. Is it audible now? Somebody said not audible.
Yes.
Is it better?
Yes.
All right. So
Okay.
the second aspect is that yes, there are some channels who do propagate stories because it suits their agenda, perhaps political agenda. And I'd really not like to get into the details of it because I don't want to point fingers at this point. But I'm sure people who consume news know what channels these are, who pick up videos which suit their agenda and then propagate it.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. There is one question from Gabeta Rajneet Kumar. He says that now it is time for the traditional journalists to adapt themselves towards convergence or convergent journalism. So what is your view on that?
Well, I completely agree with Ranjit. It is certainly a time where every journalist should be as independent as possible and as media savvy as possible, as social media savvy as possible. And that is something that I'm sure we're also learning in journalism schools now. Convergent journalism, new media, alternative media, they're all things that people are being taught even when they're learning to be a journalist. Initially, it was all about learning to write in a certain manner, learning to speak in a certain manner, and of course, ethics and the other aspect that a journalist needs to bear in mind, objective reporting. But now it's also about learning the tools. So when I'm going on the field, even if I don't, I'm a television journalist. So a traditional television journalist only travels with her crew. The crew includes a camera person, a person who handles the live view for the outdoor broadcasting van, which essentially transmits my video to the newsroom and they create a channel. But now, especially during the coronavirus crisis, I'm independent as it gets. I go with my Mojo K. I have my own phone. I have a smartphone. I have a high-speed broadband internet dongle. I have a mic now. We get mics which get attached to your phones now, so that really helps in recording clearer voices. And every time I'm out in the field, I'm independent enough. I don't need my camera person to really shoot videos, to shoot content. And there are many editing softwares that people are using. Mainstream journalists are adapting to this change, coming more converted than before. Traditional forms of media are no longer isolated. So if I work in a news channel, I also write articles on a website. I also put out videos on social media. So as a journalist, it's more important than ever to be able to put forth your news story, put forth your information, not just on your traditional media platforms, but also be convergent enough to take it to all other platforms. And that is something that is being done accessibly, very, very important at the hour, because the audience is not only at one place. Initially, all news audience only read the newspaper, only watch a news channel, but now the audience is everywhere, so the journalist also has to.
Okay, thank you. And there is,
I hope that answers.
yes, there is one more question from Sharda Koti. The question is, to what extent do you think that we should rely on alternative journalism, since most of the news, those who are viral on social media, they pick up those stories. So how, and the next one is how we can double check those information that we find on social media or through alternative media.
See, there are many facts that are out that can be shared. In fact, I will share some important materials on fact checking and the importance of fact checking and the tools of fact checking. It is fair. There are many online courses that are dealing with it. Checking websites. I make fun, and I know Prateek Sinha, who's the owner of All, who's the editor-in-chief of All, who's starting this venture along with Zubair. They have managed to truly get the entire aspect of fact checking. As to, once a video is viral, the first thing that we put is on the internet. There are old videos that are circulated, with the spin in current times. So a very basic key search on YouTube, on Google, will bring up those videos to you, and then you will know for a fact that these videos were something, that this particular video was uploaded in October. I'll give you a recent example during Cyclone Nisarga, which hit Mumbai and Maharashtra. There was a video which was circulating on alternative media platforms, which was also picked up by mainstream news, of the eye of the storm. So you could see that eye of the storm, but a simple key search on YouTube, cyclone, water, showed me a video that was uploaded by somebody in October 2019 of a water sprout that hit Goa, and it was the same video. And that is how we learned that the video which is now circulating on social media, which says that this is of Cyclone Nisarga, was essentially of a water sprout back in 2019. So that is how videos can be verified. There are of course other tools. Some verifications are difficult and some are easier. On also people which are doing this job for you. So all means is doing that job for you. There are several other fact check websites which are doing this for you. So you always, when you see a viral video, you first check these fact checking websites, whether they cover it, whether they clarify it. Before you share, you should always check. You should also check basic things like, if a video is telling you that this is from UP, but the surroundings, does not look like UP, it looks like Maharashtra, then you know that there is a problem. So it is about consuming news in a responsible manner. This is because in this information boom age that we're living in, there are people who are going to misuse it. There are people who are propagating fake news and who are circulating fake videos. So when you are consuming it, or before, when as a journalist and aspiring, when you share it before sharing, you should all verify these things. You should fact check as much as possible. If you know a regional journalist, if there is a video from Saharanpur, and if you know a regional person, a person who lives in Saharanpur, a regional journalist even better, who lives in Saharanpur, who covers Saharanpur, ask that person before and researching something that you on or doing the media platforms.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. there
Did
is
I get
one.
that answer? Did I get the question right?
Yes. Right. There is one important and very interesting question, ma'am. Do you think that the alternative media actually has become mainstream media? Because we feel that now alternative media is no more a social media. Actually, it works like a mainstream media. So what do you say? From Shaukat Azim.
Well, see, these are Shaukat Azim, that's a very interesting question indeed. See, these are terminologies which were developed, right from the time journalism and information, as we know it, started propagating back in the 18th, 19th century for that matter. Mainstream media as a term in India is late 1990s, early 2000s. News channels and newspapers, traditional journalism, traditional form, they are the ones who propagate so, mass communication is what mainstream media. Now, alternative media come with it. They are not essentially not all alternative media platforms are mass communication in nature. Many of them are niche as well. We have websites which only cater to tech. We have websites which only cater to human rights. We have websites and even social media platforms, social media accounts. Now, there are influencers in social media, but you can always see that one particular influencer is perhaps giving you information related to one particular aspect. Somebody only gives you information about Delhi government. Somebody only gives you information about child labor and child rights. So many alternative media platforms are niche in their coverage. So that is where the terminology differentiates between a mainstream form, which is the mass communication platform, and a media necessary mass communication. There would be some who would also be communicating masses on general issues, but many alternative media platforms are niche in nature. So that is where the differentiation lies. Another aspect is, as much as I'd like, of course, the Indian media as a whole is going through a crisis, and mainstream journalism, as we know it, is also being questioned, and of course, many a time for the right reason. But having said, the whole aspect on fair use is more on alternative media platforms, especially so. You cannot trust everything that on social media. So that is it. There will always be, and there should always be the distinction when for audiences, for viewers, as to whether social media can be entirely safe. And that trust deficit is stopping it from becoming mainstream.
Okay. Yes.
Professor.
Any question from the participant side? Okay.
I think
There
we
is.
can take 2-3 questions more.
Okay, fine. There is one more question. Twitter can be considered as an alternative media from Monu. What is your opinion?
Well, I love Twitter. I am very active on Twitter of late. I used to hate it initially because I didn't understand it, and that is a problem with many people. At least in the past 2-3 years, we've seen that shift of many of our, everyday life. People are more active on Twitter than they are on perhaps Facebook. Facebook used to be the social media platform in India, but now Twitter is exceedingly overtaking that. And I'm also very active on Twitter when it comes to reporting facts, reporting news, reporting things that is on the ground.
Ma'am,
Is very
your audio is not clear.
If you right manner, it can be very helpful.
Ma'am, can you repeat yourself?
Okay,
your audio is not
clear. Is it better now?
Yes.
Yeah, is it better now? Should I repeat?
Yes, ma'am. Please repeat.
Okay. Is it better? All right.
Yes, ma'am.
So Twitter, I was just telling you that I used to hate Twitter initially, and I took some time to catch on to it. But now I love Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter. I put out my reports on Twitter. I download the reports push on Twitter. It is a very effective tool of putting out information.
if used in the right manner, it certainly is. And India is witnessing a Twitter boom. Many news articles, many news pieces are essentially becoming popular on Twitter. Many news personalities are able to use Twitter to truly interact with the audience, because it has a certain level of interactivity as well. So when I put out something, I instantly get a feedback from people who would either question it, or who would be grateful for it, or who would also point out a mistake. So Twitter has that interactivity that mainstream news platforms do not have, and that stands true for most alternative media platforms. That interactivity with the audience is there, but at the same time, there is a flip side to it. Twitter also has many trolls. It has people who you have the IT cells of most political parties who are active on Twitter and who would not take any anti-party story. They would come out on guns blazing with their troll army and attack a piece of genuine news, attack a piece of fact check information. So that is the flip side of Twitter. And Twitter is I truly believe in this, and I would like I hope this answers your question. Twitter is a means to propagate your journalism. It is a means to share your journalistic work, but it itself is not journalism. Journalism for me will always be reporters who have their feet on the ground, who report stories themselves, who do the legwork that is required to fact check a piece of story, who talk to people and get things on record. That is journalism. Twitter is propagating and sharing that journalism, but not journalism in itself. People who are only active in Twitter and only share information from one point to another, and they just use Twitter to share information, they are not completely doing, they're not doing justice to journalism. Journalism has to be on the ground report out, and then Twitter can be used to share it. Twitter itself cannot be a journalistic platform. Twitter is something that enhances other journalistic platforms.
Okay, thank you. And there is one more hard-hitting question. So we are prepared to answer it.
I've got plenty of hard-hitting questions here today. I'm impressed.
What is his name? Okay, Lokesh Babu. He says that whatever we discuss in any seminar or any discussion, ultimately media sides with the political or corporate lobbies. So what do you think? There is no social ethics, no ethics, journalistic ethical things in this. So what do you want to say?
This is shared by Lokesh, right? Lokesh, that's a very hard question, and every time I address aspiring journalists, I always get questions which are around this topic. So I'm very happy to address it, although my answer is perhaps not going to be satisfying as you know, because as much as I'd like to hate to admit, it is true that Indian journalism is going through a very difficult time. Mainstream media are owned by politics. Many channels, many news channels, many newspapers do side with one political outfit, perhaps in the coverage of some news. So that is happening, and that is evident for all to see. And sensationalism, verification of news, partisanship, these are all real issues that plague the Indian media industry. So that is true that we are going through that time. But having said that, as a reporter, and until very recently I used to be called a young reporter. So as a young reporter, I have always fought against all the cynicism that surrounds the media industry, all the skepticism that surrounds the media industry, all the negativity that surrounds the media industry, and I have tried to stay true to what are my reasons for being a journalist. What are things that drive me to work in this profession? And for most people, I'm sure many of the aspiring journalists who are perhaps on this webinar as well, the reason that any of us wants to be a journalist or wants to do journalism is because we want to do something great for our country, that we want to, lead to a positive impact, drive social change, cover the right stories, all the ethical reasons for us to be a journalist. I would say, and I would urge you all to stay true to your ethics, to stick to your ethics, to stick to your idealism. Because if everyone gives up, and while yes, there is negativity, yes, there is cynicism and rightful cynicism, yes, there is there are people who are driving their own agenda in the form of journalism. But if you just give up after looking at all that is around you, there will be no one left to do actual journalism. So it is important to despite to remain ethical, to remain idealistic, to fight these circumstances that plague the Indian media industry. Because if you won't, then who will? And then it's a completely lost cause. I still believe there are many journalists out there in mainstream media, in alternative media platforms, who still are true to their ethics, and we should have faith in them, and we should hope that there'll be more like them who will keep sticking to their ground, and that's the only way in a democracy. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you very much. Any question from the participants? I think we are going to take one more question. Isn't it, ma'am?
Yeah, can you repeat what you just said? My audio was lost a little bit.
Okay. There is one question. I don't know the name because he has signed in with Redmi. So what is the future course of action with respect to alternative media in comparison to mainstream media? Means what is the future of, or what do you see in the future of alternative media?
I see. I feel that the technology boom that we are witnessing, not just in India but globally, essentially means that there is no turning back. There is no going back. Alternative media platforms, as we know it, will only see a rise. We will only see it becoming more and more mainstream. We will only see more alternative media platforms coming up because when there are so many tools available and when there is so much information that is available to be propagated, that means that there is no way that suddenly we will go back to only being reliant on traditional media platforms. I feel that our reliance on alternative media is only going to increase. So the future looks very bright if you are a responsible journalist who does his share of fact checking and verifying. Then an alternative media platform is the best place for you because the future is digital. So going forward, it's only going to become even more reliant, even more mainstream, even more powerful if used in the right manner.
Okay, thank you very much.
In fact, I'd like to add something. I'd just like to add something.
Okay,
if you
fine.
look at 5 years or 6 years back, or even 7 years back, we didn't have as many websites. We didn't have as many people active on social media. Now we've seen that change. Initially, new media, digital media, like I learned it in college, was still being, and we were being told it's going to be the future, it's going to be the next big thing. It is the next big thing right now, and in the future, it's going to be even bigger. So it's only growing, and that's the trajectory. We have more news websites, we have more multimedia websites, we have more multimedia journalists who are, using conversion to journalism, propagating, and things are better with alternative media. And for journalists, it's a good future. It's a good. I think there's a lot of scope in alternative media, and going forward, there'll be better revenue models. So while affiliate media think a lot, going forward in the future, there will be better revenue which will lead to more jobs in alternative media platforms. So certainly, the future looks promising.
Okay, thank you. Any more question? Ma'am, can we take one more question if you don't mind?
All right, okay. So we'll have one question. I hope it does justice.
Yes, and this will be the last one, I think. There is one question. Indian media, do you think that, so what is your opinion? Whether Indian media is playing a positive role, a constructive role, or a negative role? And how do you elaborate this?
That does see, I
Ma'am,
stories that have come here in the past years have been so stressing.
there is some
Audio
problem in
error?
your audio. Yes, there is some problem in your
Okay.
audio.
Okay, wait, let me just fix it. Is it better?
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Is it better now?
No, no better. Please continue, ma'am.
All right. So, okay. So this is a very conclusion because we'll sum up our entire webinar. So I'm happy about that. As a person, I'm a very optimistic person. I believe in looking at the positive side of things. And the reason I am like this is because every time I go out in the field, I see a lot of distress, I see a lot of tragedy. Especially the past 1 year, I have covered stories which were very, very, very disturbing, which, the kind of issues that we've seen in our country, whether it is, my investigation on child prostitution, children as young as 11 were being pushed into the sex trade. This is something that happens in our country. The number of rape cases in our country. Over the past 6 months, we've seen riots happen in the national capital. We've seen the anti-CAA protests and also the alleged police brutality that took place in various parts of the country. So we already have a lot of negativity around us. So my defense mechanism to deal with what I witness on the ground is by staying positive. So that's the reason I'm a positive person. And which is why I would say that all hope is not lost. Media, whether it is alternative, it still has a great deal of power and influence, and there are people who are responsible, there are people who are ethical, there are people who are fighting the system. Trust me, there are people, I know them, I'd like to believe I am one of them, and there are many of my colleagues who are doing the same, who fight for their stories, who try to cover the right stories. There are organizations which are at a great deal of personal and professional cost are putting out the right kind of information out there. So media as we know it in India is still playing a constructive role, and I'd like to believe they will continue to do so. And it's not, all hope is not lost, and going forward, while yes, there are responsibilities that need to be taken into account, people have to be more accountable, journalists have to be more responsible, audiences, viewers have to be more responsible while sharing information. But if all of us stick to our ground, then yes, the media will play its constructive role in speaking truths to power and bringing out the truth to the public, and fighting against injustice and trying to drive a positive change. So it's a collective effort, but I believe it will happen. Professor Javed, was I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible. Thank you very much for your insightful talk and very convincing answer. After a very couple of minutes, I think there will be one more guest, Mr. Rifat Javed. But I feel sorry that he had to go to the hospital due to some medical emergency of his, because some of his friends got problem injury. So, then I requested him, and I think he will be joining very soon right now after some time. I think any...
All right, thank you. Thanks a lot. I had a great time. I had
Thank
a
you,
great
ma'am.
time, and I am very impressed by the questions that I got. I think they were very informed questions. I feel that many of your students are here because they're asked right questions, and at the end of the day, that is what journalism is all about. It is about asking the right questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, ma'am. And next time, I think if you get the opportunity to have you with us once more, that will be good for us. So I'll ask our Dean, ma'am. Ma'am, would you like to say something?
I would just like to sum this up that Ms. Zeba Warsi was very, very energetic and enthusiastic. And as I could see that the questions were getting more and more aware and more informed.
Hello.
As Zeba herself has said. And I think that the questions have been leading to the right, more and more informed answers, and Ms. Zeba Warsi was good enough to give us all the answers. Thank you, ma'am. We hope to see you again, and we hope to invite you again for a better session. Hello, Javed.
Hello.
Can you hear?
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Hello.
Javed, can you hear?
Yes, ma'am, please. Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Hello. Ji, ma'am, please.
Yeah, thank you. Is Namrata there? Is she going to give a vote of thanks?
No, ma'am. Actually, we have one more guest, and he is getting problem to just sign in. So that's why we have to wait for a little bit of time. Actually, due to some medical emergency, he had to go to the hospital. So now he has come back, and he will be joining right now, but getting some problem right now with Zoom. Ziba ma'am, if you like to join us, then you can stay on Zoom, or if you want to leave, you have permission to leave. No, it is up to you. Ma'am, we are not getting your voice. I think your audio is mute.
Yeah. I would just like to thank ma'am for those words. I definitely had a great time talking to the students, and like I said, they're asking the right questions. And I feel I can learn a great deal from them. So perhaps another time we can have a more interactive question, but I can ask questions to them and they can help me understand a lot of things, with regards to journalism. That was a very interesting aspect. I thoroughly enjoyed myself. I would love to be here further, but I really have a deadline to chase. So thank you so much for inviting me, and hope to see you all again.
Thank you. Thank you. मैम उनको ज़रा टाइम लग रहा है, वो रिफत साहब को एक्चुअल में कुछ टेक्निकल इशू आ गया है, इस वजह से नहीं कर पा रहे हैं जो है, तो अभी थोड़ा और वेट कर लेते हम क्या. व्हाट इज़ योर एडवाइस एंड सजेशन?
अगर टाइम लग रहा है तो you had better put up a banner जो फिर बाद में आएंगे. People are waiting, so how do you feel about this? आप एक क्वेश्चन डाल सकते हैं from the Faculty of Arts, Science and Humanities. Post a question that would you be able to, how long do you think it's going to be before Mr. Rifat Javed joins us? Because the participants may have other things. So would you think you can take a call from them?
I think in between I'm just uploading the feedback form so that the participants can fill up those forms.
Right, you can do that. So that if they have give the many people were asking for the feedback form.
Yes,
and some of the questions you can have them dealt with again with Mr. Javed if he's able to come.
okay. So I request all the participants kindly fill up the feedback form, which I just put up in the chat box. Those actually who haven't filled the form, they can fill the form from the chat box. हाँ, एक मिनट में यहाँ से मैं आपको को होस्ट बना देता हूँ सर। आप एक बार वीडियो फिर से ऑन करिए, ऑन हो जाएगा। को होस्ट बना, हाँ ये मोर में जाके एक मिनट आ रहा है ना सर? जी 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 सर, जी सर, जी सर, ठीक है। थैंक यू वेरी मच सर. So participants, we have one more guest, Mr. Rifat Javed Saab. I would like to just introduce in a very short span of time, and then we'll be starting with our next session. So please, I would like to welcome Mr. Rifat Javed Saab. Actually, Javed Saab has been in this field of journalism for the last 23 years. And then he spent 12 years with BBC in United Kingdom before launching his own portal called Janta Ka Reporter. Rifat Saab had a brief journey with India Today, working as a managing editor input for all the 4 TV channels for this group. And then I think his last role was with BBC as a international coordinator editor. And he has also, he had worked with Times of India and Rediff.com. So I think Javed Saab now he has been working a lot in this field, what we call alternative media. I hope the participants will get more insight into this topic. So I welcome Mr. Rifat Javed Saab. Please, you can continue with this session. And thank you very much for joining with us. Sir, your audio is mute. Let me.
I think audio and video both are new.
Now it's on, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting and to speak on the role of alternative media during the global COVID-19 pandemic. Just a slight correction. I've never worked with Times of India. I worked with Statesman. Rest of the
Sorry, it was Statesman and Rediff Mail.
Yeah, so Statesman was my first newspaper where I started my journalistic career. Look, when we launched Janta Ka Reporter, there was, we were one of the first few websites which decided to hold the government to account. And the reason why we decided to launch Janta Ka Reporter, I could have gone back to UK, work in some companies, some decent news organization on good salaries and live a happy life. But we thought there was a crying need, for a platform to exist which should question the government, because that's what was not happening. People were really scared, and people were very scared of 2 particular individuals, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Home Minister, who was not a minister at that point, Amit Shah. There was almost you could see the fear that they would refer to Prime Minister Narendra Modi without naming him. And if there was any, glaring example of poor governance, there's no question of blaming Narendra Modi. You would blame everybody else in the world except Amit Shah. So I thought, that is not the reason why I had decided to become a journalist. I mean, I don't know if any one of you know, but I have said it from many public platforms that I was All India NCC Best Cadet, and I had signed up to be Army officer. I was shortlisted for SSB interview, which I couldn't make it. So I always wanted to, the reason why I had chosen journalism alternative career was to be able to make some difference in people's life. Now here I could see that, that that was not happening. In fact, the reason why I had to leave my India Today job, very senior level executive job, was because I didn't suit the agenda of the government. I was someone who was questioning. I was somebody who was not willing to take the order from 11 Ashoka Road. That's where the BJP headquarters used to be that time. So I didn't fit the scheme. I didn't fit the template that existed here. People say that you made a mistake by leaving the BBC job and joining India Today. I don't believe that. I always think that whatever happens for a reason. And perhaps, I had to lose my India Today job so that I could launch Janata Ka Reporter. So Janata Ka Reporter was one of the first news websites. That time, mind you, there was no wire. A scroll used to maintain a very low profile. And that's it. In terms of the digital platform, these were the only platform that existed. So we were the one who started calling out, Prime Minister's lies. He used to make sort of tall claims, fake claims at international platform. And we started naming them and saying, look, you are wrong. You're shaming India. You're bringing disrepute to India. Then, as you know, the history, it's a history now. We were the one who exposed Rafael scam. That's a different thing that the court decided to take a different view on that. And I don't want to comment on that. But we had ample evidence, even till today, that proves the complicity of the government in a huge level scam. That proves that. And we have the evidence and we have stuck to it. Anil Ambani decided to file defamation case, not against us, against Congress party, because they decided to go to the press, based on our report. लेकिन हम इस पे कायम हैं कि this is the story, that the fact is there in public domain. Now we could do it. I don't think that kind of expose was possible by any so-called mainstream media, or I call it lapdog TV channels, because my belief is that the role of the media is to be the watchdog. Unfortunately, in the last 6 years, we have transformed ourselves to be the lapdog of politicians, particularly from the news. You translate that into Hindi, they call it Godi media, some call it North Korean channels. But it's a bit more serious now. We used to make fun of it. We used to say that your Godi media, your entertainment channels, your North Korean channels, but it's a bit more serious. Their actions are causing, security threat to ordinary citizen. Their actions are actually taking people's lives. In the context of COVID-19, you can't find a single TV channels which has not been involved in defaming a particular community by blaming them, for the spread of the deadly virus. Only in India, by the way, only in India. I mean, I stay in UK. I was in UK all throughout February. I came here on the 4th of March. Now, this had become a huge crisis even in UK by that time. India was sleeping. The government was sleeping. So instead of asking government the question that why you are not taking any actions in order to, prevent the virus from becoming a pandemic in India, we found a scapegoat in Muslim community. And we started, in the guise of blaming Tablighi Jamaat, we started defaming the entire Muslim community. And suddenly, every channel, and including some politicians like Mr. Kejriwal, it became a fashion for them to blame Muslims. And in everyday press conference, if you remember, particularly Mr. Kejriwal's press conference, he used to have a segment called "Itne log aaj hue hain positive, isme se Markaz ka ye contribution hai." So if there was 100 people who had tested positive, और उसमें 10 अगर मरकज का था, Mr. Kejriwal wasn't telling us कि वो 90 और का source क्या था, but he felt it important to blame, Muslim community for the 10 positive cases. Now it all started. It had its trickle down impact. जब politicians ने कहना शुरू कर दिया, मीडिया को तो एक मिल गया बैठा बैठाया. अब मोदी से सवाल कौन पूछेगा? अब मोदी से ये कौन पूछेगा कि भाई आप जिस वक्त आप ट्रम्प को होस्ट कर रहे थे अहमदाबाद में, at that point, the disease had started killing thousands of people in Italy. I was in UK and I knew it had become a huge crisis even there. और आप यहाँ पे होस्ट कर रहे थे, कोई मोदी से ये सवाल नहीं पूछेगा आज in hindsight it's not a coincidence that Ahmedabad has become the second worst hit Indian city after Mumbai, you know. But you will say अरे ये तो conspiracy theory है, तो कोई ये मोदी से सवाल नहीं पूछता, ये सब तमाम अब ब्लेम गेम शुरू हो गया कि मुसलमानों को कैसे ब्लेम किया जाए, और उसके ऊपर फिर फेक न्यूज चलना शुरू हो गया. ANI was called out by UP police on more than one occasion. कहीं भी कुछ होता था कह देते थे यहाँ पे तबलीगी जमात. एक इंसिडेंट मैं बताता हूँ, नोएडा में जहाँ पे मैं रहता हूँ, नोएडा में एक सेक्टर 5 है. ANI ने एक दिन न्यूज फ्लैश कर दिया कि यहाँ पे 5 तबलीगी लोग यहाँ पे पकड़े गए हैं, ये मिसबिहेव कर रहे थे, स्पिटिंग कर रहे थे, इनको DCP नोएडा ने अरेस्ट कर लिया है. थैंक गॉड के DCP नोएडा ने पब्लिकली इसके कॉन्ट्राडिक्ट किया कि लुक यू आर स्प्रेडिंग अ फेक न्यूज, दोस 5 पीपल वर नॉट मेंबर ऑफ द तबलीगी जमात. सो इसी तरह के फैजाबाद पुलिस ने भी किया, इलाहाबाद पुलिस ने भी किया. तो आई एम ग्रेटफुल टू दिस पुलिस डिपार्टमेंट who are reporting to a BJP government in Uttar Pradesh to come out and realize the importance of their professionalism and professional integrity. तो इन लोगों ने आकर के किया, वरना पूरा अटेम्प्ट तो यही था कि ANI ने एक न्यूज फ्लैश किया. ANI को तमाम न्यूज चैनल सब्सक्राइब करते हैं, वो तमाम आंख बंद करके वहां से वो न्यूज फ्लैश हो जाता है. परसेप्शन ये जाता है कि मुसलमान बड़ी गंदी कौम है, ये इन्हीं से ये कोरोना वायरस फैल रहा है, ये लोग बहुत बदतमीज हैं. उसका जो इमीडिएट इम्पैक्ट था, जो एडवर्स इम्पैक्ट ये था कि जो गरीब फल वाले थे, सब्जी वाले थे, ये जब निकलना शुरू किया तो इनसे लोगों को कोई खरीदना भी लोगों ने बंद कर दिया. Everybody said that look, we should maintain a distance. So the economic boycott started happening. Economic boycott of the poor Muslim vegetable sellers, fruit vendors, you know, it started happening. And TV channels in particular, they played a key role. The role played by alternative media like ours, like Janata Ka Reporter, you know, various other news websites and all, we were busy, instead of reporting on what is happening on the COVID-19 crisis, we were busy responding to those fake news and busting those fake news. So ये तो एक aspect था शुरू में. As the crisis grew and the migrant workers, you know, their plight became sort of a huge issue across India, and dozens of migrant workers started dying on road as they were walking back home for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers. You know, again, at that point, the so-called TV channels and mainstream media, even at that point, they did not feel it appropriate to question the government. And I'm saying every single TV news channels, they started questioning Rahul Gandhi. They started, you know, of course, the Tablighi Jamaat had become an old issue at that point. And they started, some of them even started blaming the migrant workers. Nobody questioned that how on earth, you know, you put 1.3 billion population in one of the harshest lockdowns in the history, you know, at a 4-hour notice. Nobody questioned the, you know, audacity of a prime minister who thinks he can get away by locking 1.3 billion people in their homes, you know, at 4-hour notice. Nobody questioned that. You know, people started blaming migrant workers. People started giving us lectures from their TV studios that look, give us 21 days. आप देश के लिए इतना नहीं कर सकते हैं. Flatten हो जाएगा curve flatten हो जाएगा 21 days में. नहीं हुआ. Then they said, give us 14 days. Are you not with the prime minister? Now, this is the first time as a journalist, you know, I'm experiencing something that, you know, to be a journalist, you have to agree with the government even in their nonsensical decisions. The rule of the journalism is that you question the government decisions, you know, which you think is going against the public interest. But here we were being told and we were being lectured to agree with the government and defend the indefensible. And if you didn't do that, then of course you are anti-nationals. And if you happen to have a Muslim name like me, then you are also a jihadi. So anti-national plus jihadi, you know, so you can't question. Now, the result of that is that, you know, again, this is the first country where the spike, the COVID-19 spike actually started growing alarmingly during the lockdown. In the rest of the countries, you take an example of Spain, you take an example of Italy, America, UK, the lockdown actually prevented, you know, the crisis to spiral out of control. Here, the lockdown saw the crisis becoming a pandemic in India, and that's what has happened. So today we are in a situation where India's national capital, you know, has become out of bound, you know, for the patients. Let's say if you are living in Noida or Gurugram or, you know, outside Delhi, and if you needed to be, you needed to visit the hospital in Delhi in an emergency, Arvind Kejriwal has just, as we speak, he has just made an announcement that Delhi hospitals are out of bound for any patients who are not staying in Delhi. Now that's how bad the crisis has become. And this is the situation when we have already come out of 2 months of one of the harshest lockdowns in the history. So our focus, the role of the mainstream media, so-called mainstream media's focus was in the first phase on Muslims, in the second phase on migrant workers and blaming migrant workers and not questioning the government. So therefore, what we should have done during the lockdown in order to, increase our level of preparedness, in order to improve our healthcare system, in order to create a lot more facilities to treat COVID-19 patients, we focused on, blaming Muslims and blaming migrant workers. And now we are in a situation when we don't know what is going to happen in this country. I mean, I'm seriously worried about my life. What will happen? Yesterday in Noida, there was an 8-month pregnant lady. She went into a labor. She had some COVID-19 like symptoms. She visited 18 hospitals. 18 hospitals. All hospitals denied the admission. And later she died. This has happened last night. Now that's how bad situation has become. And I think I will not hesitate to say that, every single person who is dying either on the road walking back to their native places in migrant workers, or patients, who die after being denied admissions in government hospitals. I think every member of my fraternity in news channels, they have the blood on their hands. Because even today we are not questioning. Even today we are not questioning. And let us believe. I mean, never before in my life as a journalist in the last 24 years have I found a situation whereby, you don't question the government for anything. Either you question the opposition, you question the minority community, or you question the poor, hapless people who are the victims of the poor decisions. I mean, few days ago, you saw an elephant died. We don't know whether the elephant was indeed fed with pineapple filled with firecrackers. We don't know that. But the fake ecosystem, fake news, usual suspects in the fake news in the Hindutva brigade, they started reading 2 names that there were 2 Muslims. It's in Malappuram. And so therefore, the Muslims should be blamed again. So there was again, for anything that happens in this country, let's blame Muslims. It turned out to be a fake news. We exposed them. Who were those individuals who started spreading the fake news? There was a Deepak Chaurasia, again, fake news peddler, in the mainstream TV channel ecosystem. There was a guy who is called himself a lawyer, but essentially is a troll, Prashant Patel now. There is a guy called Amar Prasad Reddy. He says he works for a minister. These 3 individuals, when we started shaming them, they had to delete their tweet. But by that time, their tweets had already been viral, have been shared for thousands and thousands of times. It was enough time for people to take a shot and started spreading through WhatsApp. So clearly, you don't leave any opportunity to blame Muslims. Now, what will happen is that you can't defame Muslims. But what is happening is that because of your leniency, because of your decision to not hold government to account, we have a situation where we don't know what is going to happen to India. Today, India has already surpassed Spain. अब हम globally number 5th position पे पहुंच गए हैं. स्पेन को भी हमने पीछे छोड़ दिया है. जहां 2 महीना पहले बहुत बुरी हालत थी, अब वो स्पेन भी हमसे पीछे आ गया है. हमारी total number of जो positive cases है वो close to 250,000 हो गए हैं. Close to 7,000 deaths हमारा हो रहा है, and it's only gonna go up. अब वो जाएगा ऊपर at the cost of you and I, because हमने government को पता है कि who is gonna question me. Government को ये भी पता है कि अभी election को 4 साल है. इलेक्शन के पहले हम कोई हिंदू मुस्लिम का कार्ड खेल लेंगे, पाकिस्तान को अटैक कर देंगे, 40 और कोई पुलवामा टाइप का कोई इंसिडेंट जाएगा, and then I will get the vote. So government already knows the chemistry, the formula to win the elections. But उसका खमियाजा किसको भुगतना पड़ रहा है? Who is paying the price? You and I, ordinary. And that's where, thank God that now we have got not just one Janata reporter, but multiple news outlets, the news website outlets, which are actually reporting in the same direction, and there is a consensus amongst them that the story that will not be reported, we know that will not be reported by channels, we will pick it up and we will report it, whether it's to bust the fake news, whether it is to hold the government to account at whatever. Okay, there are pitfalls. It's not easy. You know, the immediate pitfall is that when Kejriwal kind of politicians consider our platform for advertisement. So clearly they know that, you know, इनको advertisement हमें वो करोड़ों रुपए नहीं मिलेंगे, हमें struggle करना पड़ेगा. But the choice, we have made the choice that we will stick to the truth, we will stick to the professional ethics of being a journalist, or, you know, and at no point we are going to compromise with all that. If the need be, shut down the operation, but we are not going to compromise with editorial ethics. And that's what we have chosen. Now, the choice that the TV channels have made, that the same TV channels who used to criticize Modi and Kejriwal in the past, now they are Modi and Kejriwal because they know that they are the two prime sources of advertisements. They are the people who can actually give them crores of rupees worth ad, and that's what is happening. But it's not the ideal situation. It's a very, very bad situation, and I think the citizens like you and I are also responsible for creating. We are not doing enough. This platform, the digital platform, you know, these are the people who are doing amazing job. Journalists are risking their lives. You see, the migrant crisis, even Supreme Court refused to listen to the migrant crisis. But who forced Supreme Court to listen to it? It was the journalists working for websites. They started traveling across the road. They started, you know, showcasing the interviews, you know, with those suffering migrant workers. And there was a time when it became impossible for people to not take you know, action on that. So much so, the Supreme Court, which had in the past refused to take notice of it and said that, look, this is not our job. Supreme Court was forced to take suo motu action and act on it. That's a different thing. The Supreme Court has still not passed any order on that. And perhaps, you know, by that time, so by the time the Supreme Court issues any order, all the migrants have reached home. But that's a mockery of justice that we are seeing these days. So, you know, thank God that we have alternative media, and this platform is only going to grow in time to come. But I think the common citizen, ordinary citizens, have to rise to the occasion and start supporting these platforms, because, you know, these platforms need support. Mainstream channels, TV channels, they are already very money. They have a lot of money from the government coming, political parties coming. You and I have to, ordinary citizens have to come and support this platform so that in future, not just during the pandemic, the ongoing pandemic, but many other issues relating to the human crisis or human tragedy, you know, these people are equipped enough, you know, to report truth. So yeah, thank you very much once again for inviting me. I'm sorry I could not join time because there has been a crisis in my friend's family. So I was attending to that. But no, it's been a pleasure. So thank you very much for inviting me and able to speak on the topic.
Thank you, Javed Saab. I would like to know from the participants if they have any question for the guest. Please, they can put up their question in the chat box. Okay, there is one question from Muhammad Akhil. He's asking, sir, during pandemic, the social media, basically the social media, it was used to communalize this pandemic situation, and they use basically to spread fake news. So what is your opinion on that?
Look, the social media, no doubt about that. I mean, the same people who are now, if you have seen the trend on Twitter yesterday, boycott Twitter. The Hindutva Brigade, they have launched a hashtag boycott Twitter. It was last night, and I tweeted about it yesterday. I said, this is moronic. You know, you are calling for a boycott of Twitter on Twitter, using Twitter platform. You know, why don't you just quit Twitter, you know, silently, so that Twitter will be a better place? Look, I mean, Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, all the social media platforms have been used, and it's not the only country where social media platforms are being used to communicate or to spread racism. It's up to the media, or it's up to the law enforcement agency to react to those kind of things. I'll give you one example. Reacting to social media, the fake news on social media is a far cry. You know the role of the police, role of the Delhi police, how Delhi police has reacted and still has been acting, in the case of Delhi riots. We've seen, so those biases are glaring. I'll give you one example. I live in Birmingham. Birmingham is the second largest city of England. I live in Birmingham. 2 days ago, I don't know if you came across a video that went viral. There was a white guy who was, sitting in a car, and the car driver was a Pakistani Muslim, and he was abusing him profusely and launching a, racist tirade. Saying, "Tum Pakistani ho, you are Paki," and whatnot. Now that video went viral. Can you believe that nobody had to file a complaint? Nobody had to report the video to Twitter. The West Midland Police, which governs Birmingham City, came to know about the video, and they decided to take action on their own. And within 4 to 5 hours, the guy was arrested, and they established contact with the person, with the cabbie driver, Muslim cabbie driver, and they started giving him counseling. And the West Midland Police, they released a long statement saying that, look, not only have we arrested the bigot, the racist guy, we are also in touch with the cabbie driver, the cabbie, and we are providing him emotional and psychological counseling. Now, that is a sign of a civilized society. That's what makes England a first world country. Here you have a Twitter users who are being followed by Prime Minister. And day in and day out, they spread fake news, they spread bigotry. I mean, classic example of day before yesterday, Deepak Chaurasia, an advisor to a minister, and there was a so-called Supreme Court lawyer, blatantly indulging in Islamophobia. We have caught them. They have supposed to delete the tweet. They should have been behind the bars by now. But they are happy. They know that they can do it with impunity. Because the law enforcement agencies will not act because they belong to the ruling party. So that's a sad state of affairs. And somebody, I think, Pritish Nandi he posted a tweet, what is happening in America, the George Floyd incident. And there was a photo of, American policemen, they're going down on their knees to say sorry. So Pritish Nandi shared that photo and said, look, can we not do the same thing in India? And I said, in your dreams, I can't see that happening even for the next 3 to 4 generations, because the last 6 years we have pushed the country back into the ages when India used to be called the snake charmer country. That's how uncivilized we have become. So I don't think it's gonna be easy, or we are gonna be we are gonna recover from this very soon. Our reputation has taken a hit, and I can tell you because I can compare this. Let's say 6 years ago, what people with India, and now how people are viewing India. There is a remarkable difference, and this is not good. This is not a
more question. There is one more question. Do you think that there should be some stringent law for the fake news, or already? Do you think that already we have such kind of law, or there is a need to be need for the formulation of this kind of law to stop the fake news?
No, I don't think we need any more laws. I think our system needs to be honest. Our system needs to understand the pitfalls of not discharging our professional duties. You don't need extra law, because there is already a law that punishes the individual for spreading fake news that creates. We have already got. We need to act on those things. There's no point just saying that we need extra laws, because if somebody is indulging in fake news, and that fake news actually threatens the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of people from a particular community, there's already enough law. There are already enough laws we have in our constitution. Why are we not acting to it? I think it's the willingness to act. That is what we need, not extra laws. We have always, we've grown up knowing that there are 4 pillars of democracy. Of course, media is not the pillar, but 3 pillars: the judiciary, the executive, and legislature. Judiciary in any other country, I have never seen. I mean, I have traveled to more than half of the world. In my past role as a BBC editor, I used to spend a lot of time in Africa, like Kenya and all. Now, Kenya is supposed to be a very lawless country, but I would not the kind of deterioration that has happened in our judiciary, that I would even in a lawless country like Kenya. So the real problem, I mean, the politicians in any country are, they don't want to be degree. In some countries, let's say they're less corrupt. In other countries, they're more corrupt. That's a pretty theme across the world. What actually forces them to act honestly is the judiciary. That if you come across some less corrupt incident or some dereliction, then you can approach judiciary, and judiciary in any other country will come down like a ton of bricks. And that is the fear. And that's the fear the politicians have in their mind.
थोड़ा रेस्ट ले लो भाई.
They know that judiciary can't interfere. Otherwise, how do you explain that in March, when the migrant crisis was at its peak, your Solicitor General Tushar Mehta is informing on oath to Supreme Court that there is not a single migrant worker walking on the road. Everybody knew that he was lying. Supreme Court judges would have known that he was lying, but Supreme Court decides to believe Tushar Mehta. And Supreme Court till date has not, admonished him or taken action against him for lying on oath before the Supreme Court. That's how bad judiciary has become in India. And that's really sad. So, you don't need additional laws. You need little bit of honesty to implement the existing laws. जो आपके already जो मौजूदा क़वानीन हैं, उनको ईमानदारी के साथ नाफिज करने की जरूरत है, ना कि नए क़वानीन को पास करने की.
Okay, sir, there is one more, and I think it is going to be the last one. Besides genuine reporting, there are a lot of news portals, those who are doing good work. So do you think that the business also matters? So how we are going to get the business for your portal?
Look, मैंने आपको ये पहली बात ये कही थी कि ये जो सिचुएशन हुई है उसमें कहीं ना कहीं हमारी जो न्यूज़ कंज्यूमिंग पब्लिक है, जो आप लोग हैं, जो ऑर्डिनरी पब्लिक है, जो न्यूज़ कंज्यूम करती है, देयर इज नो पॉइंट जस्ट ब्लेमिंग, यार ये मीडिया तो दलाल है, ये तो हमें सच नहीं दिखाती है. कभी हमने अपने आप से पूछा है कि हमने क्या रोल अदा किया है? जो ईमानदारी के साथ जो कुछ लोग आए थे और जो इस प्लेटफॉर्म पे आए थे और एक बड़ी ताकत बन के उभरे थे, उसको मजीद ताकतवर बनाने में हमने क्या रोल अदा किया? मैं अपना एग्जाम्पल, और ये मैं कोई मतलब शिकायत, बट जनरली ये एक साइकोलॉजी को एक डिस्क्राइब करता है. आज के दिन में जनता का रिपोर्टर की मंथली जो मंथली नंबर ऑफ यूजर्स हु कम टू कंज्यूम जनता का रिपोर्टर, मैंने ट्वीट भी किया था, आप मेरे टाइमलाइन पे जाइएगा, 3-4 दिन पहले मैंने ट्वीट किया था कि मंथली हमारा जो नंबर ऑफ यूजर्स हैं वो तकरीबन 40 लाख है. नाउ 40 लाख इंडिया के रिपब्लिक टीवी की औकात नहीं है कि महीने के 40 लाख लोग उसके टीवी चैनल को देखते हैं. मुश्किल से 9 या 10 लाख लोग उसको देखते हैं, और हवा बन गया है कि वो इंडिया का नंबर 1 चैनल है और पूरी इंडिया के को रिप्रेजेंट करता है. मुश्किल से 10 लाख उसकी व्यूअरशिप है, और वो व्यूअरशिप क्या है, वो एक्यूरेट नहीं है. वो उन्होंने 40-50 हजार सेट 40-50 हजार घरों में रखा हुआ है, और उन लोगों के टीवी चॉइस क्या है उसके बिना पर वो एक जनरलाइज कर लेते हैं. हमारा जो है वो एक्यूरेट है. गूगल वो देता है एक्यूरेट, कितने लोग आए, कितना घंटा उसने गुजारा, कितने पेजेस पे गए, वो तमाम एक्यूरेट आता है. हमारी मंथली है 40 लाख सिर्फ यूजर्स हैं, हमारे तकरीबन 70 लाख के आसपास मंथली पेजेस हैं, और ये हम पावरफुल हुए हैं विदाउट एनीबॉडी सपोर्ट. जब हमने लॉन्च किया था, हमने लोगों से कहा कि आप लोग एक न्यूज़पेपर पे 200 रुपया खर्च करते हैं, 200 रुपया आप यहाँ पे खर्च कीजिए, ताकि अगर मैंने ये टारगेट रखा था कि अगर 10,000 लोगों की टीम तैयार हो जाए, 200 रुपया महीना अगर हो, तो उसमें आप दुनिया की बेस्ट 30 से 40 रिपोर्टर को हायर कर सकते हैं जो इंडिया के हर स्टेट में हो. और जब भी बड़ी स्टोरी हो, बजाय इसके कि आपको फेक न्यूज का सहारा लेना पड़े, ये आपके रिपोर्टर टाइमलीनेस मैनर में न्यूज हुआ है ये वहां पहुंचेंगे और रिपोर्ट करेंगे ट्रुथ, बिल्कुल मल्टीमीडिया प्लेटफॉर्म पे, मतलब वीडियो पे भी और टेक्स्ट पे भी. इसके 2 फायदे होंगे. एक तो वो होगा कि आपकी शिकायत दूर हो जाएगी कि हमारी स्टोरी कोई कवर ही नहीं करता है, वो स्टोरी कवर होगी, और दूसरी ये कि वो ट्रुथ कवर होगी, वो सही वर्जन, आप वो वर्जन नहीं जो ये ट्विस्ट करके और गवर्नमेंट के एजेंडा को सूट करने वाली करेंगे. लोगों का रिस्पॉन्स 0 था। अब आप कहेंगे या हमारे पास 2 चॉइस है, जब लोगों का रिस्पॉन्स 0 हो गया तो हम क्या करें, दुकान बंद कर दें, वेबसाइट बंद कर दें और फिर हम वापस निकल जाए हम ये। लेकिन वो भी ऑप्शन नहीं है, क्योंकि एक बहुत बड़ी तादाद है वो पढ़ना चाह रही है हमारी इसको। तो ऐसे में हम क्या करते हैं कि हमें हार्ड न्यूज के साथ साथ हमें एंटरटेनमेंट न्यूज का भी सहारा लेना पड़ता है, क्योंकि गूगल पे जो ट्रेंड होता है ना, वो आपका हार्ड न्यूज ट्रेंड नहीं होता है, वो आपका ट्रेंड होता है एंटरटेनमेंट है कि कपिल शर्मा का शो का क्या हो रहा है, वहां पे उसकी क्या शूटिंग हो रही है, या इस फिल्म की क्या रेटिंग है। तो हमें मजबूरन इन तमाम स्टोरी को करना पड़ता है, जिससे वो नंबर्स आते हैं तो गूगल का एड रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा, गूगल का एड रेवेन्यू बढ़ेगा तो हमें वेबसाइट चलाने में आसानी मिलेगी। क्योंकि और हमारे पास ऑप्शन क्या है, सरकार हमें ऐड देगी नहीं, क्योंकि हम सरकार को हमेशा हम कटघरे में लाते हैं। अवाम हमें सब्सक्रिप्शन देगी नहीं, क्योंकि वो अपनी दुनिया में है और हम कहते कहते थक गए, लेकिन इसके बाद एक लेवल के बाद आप कहना छोड़ देते हैं वो। तो अब हमारे पास ऑप्शन क्या है, प्लेटफॉर्म बड़ा हो गया है, इसको और सर्वाइव करना है, जर्नलिस्ट को पैसे देने हैं, उनकी सैलरी देनी है, तो हमें ये मजबूरन हमें एंटरटेनमेंट का, स्पोर्ट्स की न्यूज का सहारा लेना पड़ता है। एंड आई थिंक आई एम नॉट अशेम्ड अबाउट इट, एंड आई डोंट थिंक एनीबॉडी इज अशेम्ड अबाउट इट, बिकॉज कम से कम हम गलाजत में हम नहीं जा रहे हैं, कम से कम हम में नहीं जा रहे हैं, हम एक वो चीज को जाहिर करते हैं जो हर घर में देखा जाता है। कपिल शर्मा का शो हर घर में देखा जाता है, हिंदी फिल्में हर घर लोग सब देखते हैं, स्पोर्ट्स में सबको इंटरेस्ट है, तो उस पर अगर हमने कवरेज अगर बढ़ा दी तो उसमें गलत क्या है। लेकिन आइडियल सिचुएशन में जब मैंने जनता का पोर्टल लॉन्च किया था तो मेरा ये था कि हम एंटरटेनमेंट स्पोर्ट्स वगैरह पे फोकस नहीं करेंगे, सिर्फ ह्यूमन इंटरेस्ट स्टोरी पे फोकस करेंगे। वो चीजें हमने अनलर्न की, कुछ चीजें हम नए सीखते गए रास्ते में, सीखते सीखते कुछ चीजें अनलर्न की, कुछ चीजें लर्न की, और उसके बाद अब जाकर के एक प्लेटफॉर्म
लग रही है आपने चला दिया ये
जो माशाल्लाह कि अब ये सेल्फ सस्टेनिंग प्लेटफॉर्म एक क्रिएट हो गया है ये।
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for this your extensive talk. Any question from the participant?
हेलो,
Yes.
जावेद सर, मेरा आपसे सवाल है।
जी
आप गेस्ट से सवाल
आपने
कीजिए।
जैसे आपने भी फरमाया कि मीडिया ने जो रोल अदा किया है जमात के सिलसिले में या मुस्लिम फॉरेनर्स के सिलसिले में कोरोना फैलाने के हवाले से, तो ये जो नैरेटिव माइंड सेट ये जब सेट होता है तो इसको लोकल बेस्ड जर्नलिस्ट किस तरह से खत्म कर सकता है, उसकी जिम्मेदारी क्या होती है कि वो इस नैरेटिव माइंड सेट को पॉजिटिव में बदले?
देखिए, ये लोकल लेवल पे तो जाहिर सी बात है कि जितना भी करेंगे इट विल ओनली बी हेल्पफुल, बट जो एक नेशनल लेवल पे पहले आपको ये समझना होगा कि ये सिस्टम काम कैसे करता है। ये कुछ छोटा मोटा नहीं है। ये आपने ट्वीट करवाया, उस ट्वीट को आपने आनंद फानंद में वायरल करवाया, उसका स्क्रीनशॉट किया और आपने दिखा दिया कि ये ट्वीट जो है वो 10,000 मरतबा रीट्वीट हो गई है। तो देयरफॉर वो जब भी स्क्रीन जब व्हाट्सएप से भेजा जाएगा तो लोगों का होगा कि यार सच है ये, तभी तो इतने लोग इसको देख चुके हैं ये, और उसको फैलाएंगे। तो उसका तरीका जो है वो लोकल लेवल पे आप करेंगे तो ठीक है, अच्छी बात है, लेकिन जिस चीज को जिस लेवल पे झूठ फैलाया जा रहा है उसी लेवल से आपको इसको सच के साथ काउंटर करना पड़ेगा। मैं ये देखता हूँ खासकर मुसलमानों में मैंने देखा है कि ये ट्विटर पे आते हैं और एक उल जलूल की चीजों में उलझने के लिए तो इनके पास बहुत वक्त है। कोई एक ट्रुथ को काउंटर करके एक फेक न्यूज को काउंटर करने के लिए जब ट्वीट किया जाता है तो ये उसको ना रीट्वीट करेंगे ना शेयर करेंगे। ये हिंदुत्व ब्रिगेड इसमें बहुत मुनज्जम है, बहुत ऑर्गेनाइज्ड है, उनको पता है इनको ये काम कैसे करता है, पता है उनको कि एक झूठ फैलाई जाए और आप यकीन मानिए, आप जाकर के ऑब्जर्व कीजिएगा, विद इन मिनट्स वो हजारों में वो रीट्वीट हो जाएगा। वो झूठ हजारों में रीट्वीट होने को तैयार है। यहाँ हमारे लोग ट्विटर पे तो हैं, फेसबुक पे तो हैं, लेकिन सच को उस तादाद में रीट्वीट नहीं करेंगे, शेयर करेंगे वो। तो ये एक सोशल मीडिया, एक जो हाइजीन है, एक अवेयरनेस है, इसकी बहुत जरूरत है हमारे लोगों में। मैं ये मानने को तैयार नहीं हूँ कि अब हमारे लोग अब सोशल मीडिया पे नहीं है, बहुत है, बहुत बड़ी तादाद में है। जो सोशल मीडिया की लिटरेसी मुसलमानों में है वो भी बड़ी अच्छी है माशाल्लाह। इस चीज को आप यूज कैसे करते हैं, आप पैसिव बाय स्टैंडर्ड नहीं बन के रह सकते कि अच्छा मैं यहाँ पे हूँ, वो किसी को हमें जाकर के गाली देना होगा तभी हम ट्वीट करेंगे और अगर हम किसी कोई अगर हमारे लिए अगर ये इस चीज को ये कर रहा है तो इस चीज को हम और आगे बढ़ाएं, वो हम नहीं करेंगे। देखिए, जिस शिद्दत से फेक न्यूज को फैलाया जा रहा है, उसी शिद्दत से आपको ट्रूथ को भी काउंटर करता हुआ ट्रूथ है उसको आपको फैलाना पड़ेगा। ये बेसिक है, बहुत बहुत सिंपल है। चाहे कोई भी उसको काउंटर कर रहा हो, आपको उसको काउंटर करना पड़ेगा। और प्लस ये कि अपने लेवल पे अगर आप करना चाहते हैं, लोकल लेवल पे, बाय ऑल मींस टेक द स्क्रीनशॉट ऑफ द ट्रूथ और उसको आप अपने व्हाट्सएप ग्रुप में फैलाइए। उसका भी एक फायदा होता है, बहुत बड़ा फायदा होता है। तो ये दो चीजें आपको करनी पड़ेगी, सोशल मीडिया अवेयरनेस और इंगेजमेंट आपको अपनी बढ़ानी पड़ेगी, और जो ट्रूथ फैलाई जा रही है फेक न्यूज को बस्ट करते हुए, उसमें आपको अपना किरदार अदा करना पड़ेगा।
Okay, thank you very much, sir. I think we are going to conclude this webinar. Thank you for sharing your experience with the participants, and I hope in future we'll get more opportunity to get from you to learn from your experience. For vote of thanks, I would like to hand over to Dr. Namrata Rawat for the vote of thanks, please.
Yeah, it's you, and we always support you.
Unmute, Dr. Namrata ma'am, please unmute.
Hello, am I audible, sir, now?
Yes, please.
Yeah, hello everyone. We have been seeing that the COVID-19 has been shaking the world very badly. In such a situation, the media has to play its very vital role by playing as hand bridge between the policymakers and the citizens. Perhaps we have even seen that few mainstream media failed to handle such situations, and alternative media has emerged as the one of the best, quickest and effective media to reach the people very soonly and quickly. Perhaps we need to verify the news from alternative media also. There are some loops and challenges also in alternative media. I would like to thank Dr. Syed Shah Khusro Hussaini, the Chancellor, Khaja Bandanawaz University, Kalburgi, who has permitted us to conduct one-day webinar on the topic, the role of alternative media during COVID-19 pandemic. And today's the experts were Mr. Umashankar Singh, Foreign Affairs Editor, NDTV India, Ms. Zeba Wasi, Special Correspondent, CNN News 18, Mr. Rifat Javed, Editor-in-Chief, Jantaka Reporter. Dear experts, we are very much glad to have you in this webinar, and we thank you for your informative and very innovative and very deep knowledge about your talks, sir. And next, I would like to thank our participants who shown their very much interest and enthusiasm to take the active part in our webinar. I thank one and all to make this webinar very successful, sir. Now I hand over this to Javed, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So I think I would like to conclude with a really heartful thanks to our guest and to the participants. Thank you. We hope to organize this kind of seminars and webinars in future also. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.